Hi, Dov here, and today we have a new episode in the art review series, and today we'll be checking out the work of Ethan Lee. Now, I did find this guy first, actually via Twitter or X, but I sort of lost his work or his profile because I do follow quite a few people there, but I eventually refound their profile or their work here on the Instagram sort of website. And yeah, so I do like their style. It reminds me a little bit of a Kobe Sek. He's a Singaporean concept artist, just because of the way they're very into big, like powerful. Is it powerful or just shapes? Like it's so apparent in their work. Um, Wait, this one seems like a low resolution image. I really hate that in Instagram. I know you can't really control it. It sort of does it on its own, but um, so let me just see if it's a process. Okay, it is a process. So it starts out with a very rough line sketch, but even in this stage, um, like he pretty much figured everything out because in the very end, it's still mostly there. Okay, let me just go back. So after the line sketch, grayscale values, making the lighter grays or making the grays in the back further back, sort of light gray, and then the foreground sort of elements here, especially with the characters a bit more darker. And you will see for this specific like cat girl and this guy, it does have the most contrast. So you will see a wider range of values. If you look at the grays here, you see a lighter gray and a very dark gray, and basically other grays with between those values. But for these two characters over here, the grays are a little more the same. So they're creating some kind of hierarchy in this stage as a base, right? And then they'll add in the colors. Now, I do notice they made this guy a bit darker, but look at how the contrast is not as strong as, say, this chick, because obviously this is the main sort of character. But I like how it's very rough, like the edges. And even in the end, I think they'll show some of those initial line works, which I do like. It just adds a bit of that uh, sketchy feel, reminds me a little bit of the sketch or artwork of sketches, paintings, illustrations of Madao. I like that look where they show off those sort of loose, dynamic initial line drawings, right? And not everything has to be like detail. I mean, look at how everything gets so like abstract esque in the back, but obviously you get more detail as you go further into the front in the foreground elements, and obviously again the cat girl does have a little more detail. Wait, I do have some open stuff. Okay, so this is like, yeah, I think I opened this up beforehand, so this is a much better sort of resolution. Yeah, and the color choices, I like it. It's pretty diverse. It's not boring, and that's kind of an issue I have, and I think a lot of people have, is even if your shot or your composition is good, like the way you diversify like your colors is like it matters. Like, sure, everything here, like most of the colors here are like bluish, greenish, right, for the background, aside from the main character, but look at how varied it is. Like it's not boring to look at. And the other accent color would have to be the red. So everything in the background, the floors, the walls, it's all like cool. Meaning cooler temperature, like blues, greens. And they do have some warmer elements like this white thing. I'm assuming it's from, I don't know, maybe a window. But we also have these sorts of like red pieces of, I don't even think it's supposed to make total sense. Maybe this one is a piece of paper, but like these bits of colors here, they're more like accent, random stuff. I don't know, it just adds a bit of something, right? But it's not taking over the whole thing. Like you can tell, like for the most part, it's still a cooler environment, right? And yeah, look at how the rendering is done, very shapy, very boxy, and they're not really focused on being so tight with their work, which I do like. It's a bit impressionistic, sort of. A bit blocky, sure, but Like I do see a lot of like sharper points, like squares, rectangles, and less curvier stuff. You know, less rounded corners for me, or that's what I see anyway. Um, and yeah, I just like it. So this one is the one earlier, but this is a better resolution. I do see they color the initial sketch a bit. It's a bit red here. So maybe it just helps it blend into the other colors. But I do know a lot of artists, like when they draw something line work wise, they will convert that, or they'll even start off with a red color, or maybe they'll start off with a black color and then eventually like do a color overlay and make it kind of reddish, brownish, or orange-ish. And I think it's because it blends well with other colors. That's kind of my guess, especially with like skin. Um, but yeah, interesting. I like it. And I know when you darken up red, like if you remove the hue of it and just let the value remain, out of all the hues, I think it has the darkest value. So it kind of makes sense that you would use that as a. So it basically has enough darkness that you can still see it in like when you add other colors, right? My guess, who knows? Yeah. Let me just go further down. I do think this is fried rice. And it's cool because she has like a robotic arm here to help her with the seasoning, maybe some salt here or something. I just like the vibes though of their work. I think this is like a series of process like steps. We have a cat here, so it starts off with this initial very rough sort of dark a pencil sketch or charcoal sketch, just laying out the main idea. Not everything has to be like defined here. I think the main sort of focus for this session is to jot down what the idea is, and then you can refine things later on. So after that, well, we can't see like the grayscale process, but I think they just jumped in the color, and it's almost like a gouache painting because it's very opaque. You don't see like a buildup of, like you don't see opacity or transparency. It's very direct, kind of like gouache. Okay. So I do see a lot of textures in their work. I'm not sure if it's from the brush themselves or if it's like a texture in a layer mode, like multiply, soft light, who knows. But the idea here is she's on the phone trying to cook and there's sort of a robotic arm over here. And I like how his scenes are just kind of vibrant, you know, like it's like the sun sort of vibes. The sun vibes like it's an not early morning, but you know, morning, like golden hour types of shots. It just feels very sort of bright and inviting and warm and cozy. So I think all they did was sort of refine things, add more detail, right, for the microwave in the back, some tiling, some notes, post-it notes on the refrigerator. Defining the wok and the food within the wok. I'm guessing that that's fried rice or maybe omelet. Let me just, and this is the final one. I think they toned down the contrast a bit because maybe it was too darker, and then look at that, pretty cool. Yeah, you will see these kinds of illustrations more in like the viz dev, visual development sort of areas, in like animation sort of spaces or storyboarding spaces, concept art spaces. I'm not sure if I already mentioned this, but it kind of reminds me. Another artist I would recommend is Kobe Sek. I believe he's a Singapore. Oh, why is it so blurred? I'm not sure why it's so freaking blurred. Yeah, he does a lot of these, like the color choices of Ethan. I feel like Kobe Sek does the same thing. Where it's very poppy, very bright. And the painting style is very similar, like very opaque, kind of impressionistic. Meaning they're not worried too much about the details and everything. It's just straight to the point. Well, and what's cool about these sorts of styles or approaches is, there's a first of all, it's done way faster because you're not focusing on like rendering every single thing, but also because you're not focusing on all the little details. Like you have more time to really figure out like the main sort of ideas. So oftentimes when you have illustrations like this or sketches like these or pieces like these, it ends up becoming a lot more powerful, more poppy, more just striking because again you're just focusing on the main ideas and it just gives you more opportunity to tweak things that actually matter instead of spending the rest of your time working on some minor details. And it isn't like you're not doing details. Obviously, you have to detail something. You know, you need to have enough clarity in your work for it to make sense. Obviously, the silhouette of this character very clear, but as you go further to the top, obviously the face, it does get more detailed. Just because you know, as human beings, we tend to focus more on the head and the face a lot, and then we work our way outwards. But look at the background; it's so like abstract. Um, yeah, it's kind of like abstract art. You know, it doesn't always make sense, but the vibes are there, right? I like their brushes too. Very, you know, interesting. Oh, I do see this. It kind of reminds me of one of the brushes of Feng Shui. I know it's a Photoshop default brush, you know, the flat brush thingy, but it just reminds me of those brushes. Anyway, but you look at how opaque it is, and I do see a bit of like pastel colors being used. You know, the light sort of blues, purples, those types. They're basically neon-esque colors, but way lighter. Uh, I think I also saw this on the Twitter page of Ethan Lee, but I'm not sure why it's so. Let me just do this. I'll try this. I'm gonna hit this guy. Sorry, let me just do this. Much better. So yeah, you can still see the initial sort of line sketch there. I do see a bit of a reddish tint or overlay on it. Because if it's black, it's a bit too much. Like it's in a way, it's kind of like fighting the colors. So I think that's gonna work against you. But if you make it like red, it's dark. Its value is dark enough that you can still see it, but it's not so well black. You know, so it does reduce the contrast just a little bit, enough to blend in or to blend into other colors. But it's not like it's all everywhere. Obviously, it's some parts are being hidden from the or with the paint, so it's not gonna be everywhere. But yeah, I like it. You will see these types of again shots and viz dev storyboarding, like quick sort of environment where you have to just focus on the vibe of the scene, like the general sort of mood, right? I like it. And I think he had a bit of a quick tutorial or discussion on this on his Twitter. Basically, you want to pick one side or some part of the scene where it has the most saturation. Hopefully, I'm remembering right. But in this case, in this example, look at how the background, like all of these, let me just freaking draw it here. You see this part? This whole background thing. Like that has the most saturation, and you compare these colors to the ones here, right? These are a little more desaturated, so there's something to. It's a tool for you to use to create some kind of contrast in your work, to create some kind of hierarchy. So obviously, that contrast of saturation versus desaturation, it helps you focus on something, and in this case, it's going to be because the contrast is happening here, right? Like saturation and desaturation, like both of these parts are fighting. So the focus is going to be somewhere here. And it makes sense because this is the main character. Obviously, it helps even more because she's literally at the center of the image. So the focus is going to be even more powerful, right? And obviously, also the perspective shot is like doing this, the vanishing point. So yep. I like it, very cool. But look at how it's a painted sketch. Like it feels random sometimes, but you kind of get it, you know, like it makes sense. Like you get the general the gist of it essentially. So if you're not super detailed, like it bothers you that you have to go and define things, you know, I recommend you check out the work of Ethan Lee just because there's sort of a freedom to this approach. Uh, basically, if you're just lazy with the details, you know what? It's not even laziness. Maybe you're just not into it. You know, like me. Um, Try this out. But look at how even if it's not fully like tight, it's so attractive to look at. You know, and I think you have to play with the maybe some graded maps or something. Like you need to learn how to filter your colors in the end, like color grade. Is that the proper term? Who knows? But something to make the colors all cohesive in the end, right? Some kind of filter. But look at how the floor, the reflections, pretty cool. And again, even within each plane of this thing, it's not just one color. There's like a bunch of value variations there and minimal or subtle texture variations. It just adds a bit of story. If it's all like a basic, like no texture, no extra values, it's gonna be kind of boring. So if you have this sort of quick style, um, you need something to sort of compensate for that a bit. And that's gonna be, I don't know, maybe brush variety, your colors, your values, your narrative, your storytelling, right? Um, Pretty cool. But this one doesn't have line work at all. It's like maybe they do start out with some like a basic sketch, but eventually it was sort of it's not there anymore, right? Obviously, I like the colors again, very pastel as light pinks, yellows, greens, um, very playful. And I think they have a thing for their flat brush or square-ish brushes. That's kind of their go-to brush. But again, look at the subtle textures there, and maybe they even add a bit of a noise texture in the end, just to sort of tie everything together even more. Uh, Pretty cool. It just adds a bit of richness, even though it's very subtle. It matters. So here we have. Let me just open this in a new tab. A reference here, right? But look at how they're able to simplify what they're seeing, right? Like they're not super attached to the reference. Like they know how to break things down and sort of make the reference work for them. You know, um, the shadow too. Instead of making it like in this case, a dark brown or something, make it blue. You know, make it contrast to the or contrast that to the what she's wearing, or to her. You know, she's mostly her skin is warm. Her shirt is sort of reddish. Her skirt is kind of yellow green, so maybe that's like a transitionary. Is that a word? Color. But the point is, it's a cool contrast. Cool colors here for the bag, warm colors for her, and then cool colors again for the shadow, and then warm colors for the background. Right? Pretty cool. Look at how the shapes are broken down. Even though it's not a very clean edge, it's kind of like a scrapbook kind of look or a collage kind of look, but it works. It doesn't have to be super tight, you know? In a way, the edges don't even matter as much. I mean, obviously there are edges, but it's just not super like crazily defined. So maybe that's the thing about the work. The edges are just kept simple. I mean, look at the fingers and the feet. I mean, the toes weren't even. I mean, obviously it makes sense because the most of the stuff is happening here. So you want the focus to be on the face more on the upper part of the body. So the further out you go, the less detail there is. So that makes sense. But yeah. Even the face, very cute, very demure. I like it. And again, the texture is very subtle. I do think they're using some kind of photo textures, like in the end, because some of their brushes do have their own textures, but I think in the end, aside from a noise texture, maybe they're adding something else, some kind of paper texture or something. And it looks good. It looks good. I look at how their brushstrokes are not that many, right? You don't see a lot of blending as well. But it's almost like, you know how in Photoshop there's a cutout filter where if you dump your photo in, you add that filter, it sort of breaks down your image into like shapes, and you can sort of adjust how many shapes you want to be there. Um, it kind of reminds me of that, but doing it manually too, right? Yeah, kawaii, very cute. Oh, a girl in a suit. Oh, that's not a suit. It's a blazer. Because I think here I was only able to see like the top part, but I mean it's fine too. I was just expecting like a like work pants, office lady type of a vibe. So I think she's running away from something, or maybe she's late. Um, I like the back. Most of it is cool colors. Everything is in shadow. I love the composition. Very interesting. And again, the sketches, the initial sketch, even though there are some lines that uh like if like essentially you weren't able to stick to them in the end when you did add these sorts of colors or shapes in the end. Like sometimes the shape of the blazer will go beyond your initial line sketch. Just keeping those initial line sketch, even if it's not correct, I think it adds a bit of character. You will see Loish, Loish, do this too, and it just adds a bit of something. Like there's some story there, and because even though the it's not correct, it still has that gesture, like the initial idea, and I think that can add to the final sort of illustration. So don't be afraid to keep the initial lines. If it's too ugly, then obviously remove it. But yeah, again, even this wall looks so interesting, right? It's all like bluish, like all cool colors here. The accent being like this warm sort of box thing. Um, and maybe this window, but that's it. Very interesting. Cool shadows over here. We have a warm, right? Let me just draw it. Bring out my pen. See, warm, cool, a bit of like a dark warm. It's not too bright, and then warm again, right? So there's a contrasting thing that happens here. Warm, cool, warm again, cool, right? Like the more contrast that happens, you want to use that if you want to focus on something, or if you want your audience to focus on something. And look at how even in the background, even though there's a lot of like detail in a way, like you can tell this is some kind of storefront. There's a roof here, a window. Look at how there's not much contrast, right? All of it is basically in the warm zone over here. I mean, there's some value variation, some changes in. You have some accent colors for the roofing and shit, but that's it. It's not as intense as like this whole thing over here. Pretty cool. And I think that's a challenge because if you're not careful, like you will just end up losing your audience's or your viewers' attention, or it can just confuse people. So you want to. It's not just contrast too, but also detail. You don't want to do too much. And I think Ethan Lee is a good example of um, knowing when to stop with the details. Kawa, oh, she's hot. It's over. She's hot. Right? It's so. It has energy. I like it. Um, and that's what's attractive. Uh, yeah, I like the texture on the brushes as well. It does make it look less bored. But look at how the edges are so like scrapbooky. That's the only word I can think of. Essentially, it's not too like it overshoots the lines, and even the lines beforehand, the initial line work. It's look at how like scratchy it is, and how sort of a loose. But if you add all of those things together, the gestural sort of lines that has that energy, the sort of scrapbooky painting approach where the edges are a bit sharp, uh, and not as like rounded or smooth. Um, Combine all of those things together, it just and the color choices as well. learning how to contrast things. For example, this character over here, this lady, demure. Sorry, clearly in shadow, but in the background there's obviously light, right? So you see the contrast of her in shadow being against the light sort of coming from the window. Perfect. Like you have no choice but to actually look at this character over here. Even this lamp is pointed towards her. I mean, come on. The bed pointing towards her. Everything is just coincide. Like this is where you want to look. It's about her. Kawaii. Very hot. Okay. Stop. I think we've seen enough of it. Oh, this I think is one of my favorites, or it's the first major piece that I've seen from him. From Twitter anyway. I mean, need I say more? Right? I mean, you get the vibes. Oh, it's so cool too. I like it when artists draw themselves or any kind of scene where they're drawing other artists, you know, on their tablet and stuff like that. And I love this monitor right here. I don't have it set up this way. I do know people do that for either references or maybe they have like a chat. Let's say they're streaming on Twitch or something, so it helps them see that. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Although I did see one Pinterest photo of an artist. I think she does like manga or something, and this is how she positions her tablet. So there you go. Pretty cool. I mean, again with the contrast, everything is happening here, right? This is where most of the contrast happens. So, but it's also in the center of the image, so it's kind of easy to look at it, right? But yeah, very loose lines, and I think it's a bit. Is it black? I think there's a bit of a brownish reddish tint or something. A very interesting box here. Hopefully you can see it. It's very hard to see, but it's a cool sort of stylistic choice. It's almost like a camera of sorts. And again, look at how the initial line work, the colors, when you do start adding those colors, sometimes it's short of those lines or sometimes it goes over those lines. So again, it does have that very scrapbooky collage sort of vibe, especially in the edges. And again, are they rendering every single book? Right? It's just called planes or shapes after shapes, but that's it. And then in the end, they add the maybe paper texture or something or noise texture, just to add a bit of grit to their work. But yeah. So that's it for this art review of Ethan. I will link their Instagram in the description below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.